Today I want to talk about how the push-pull technique can actually help you get your ex back. But before we actually start talking about that, there's one question that you need to get an answer to, and that's really determining whether or not you should be getting your ex back in your situation. Now, there's a lot of different thoughts on this, but ultimately I feel the best way to answer this question is by providing you with a resource that can help you understand really what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. So therefore you understand, hey, I'm not going to be wasting my time in this endeavor. So for you on our website, exboyfriendrecovery.com, I've put together a special quiz that's designed to basically tell you what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. If you're interested in taking this quiz, it's free, it'll take a really short amount of time, and it's really easy to take. Just simply look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on it. It's that simple. Okay, let's talk about the push-pull technique. So the best way to tackle this really large topic is first probably by defining it for those of you who don't know what it is. The push-pull technique is where you purposely send mixed messages to your ex, where one moment you do something or say something that can cause them to read between the lines and feel like you are interested, and then the next moment you do something or say something that makes them feel that you aren't interested. You push and then you pull. Now, if you saw that definition and got a little confused, don't worry. I'm about to use an analogy that can maybe help make you understand it a little bit better. So I've always viewed the push-pull technique as kind of like fishing. So for those of you who know how to fish, you know that when you cast your line in the water and you get a fish to bite on the line, the worst thing you could do is just pull it in immediately. But why? Well, it actually makes it easier for the line to snap or the fish to get unhooked and run away. So what expert fishermen do when they cast their line and get a bite is they do the push-pull method. They pull the fish in and then they stop and let it kind of go away or push away. And then they pull it in and then they stop, and they just repeat this process over and over again, but ever so slightly increasing the amount of intensity of their pull. And then next thing they know, they got a fish. But of course, when it comes to the push-pull method, there are two main issues I see people running into time and time again. And that's the fact that none of them know really when to use the push-pull method, and people really don't know what a good push or pull looks like in the context of getting your ex back. So luckily for you, I'm going to clear that up. Okay, let's talk about when you should be using the push-pull method first, because a lot of times when people hear about this concept, the first thing they want to do is go out and try it on someone they have a crush on or their ex-boyfriend immediately after the breakup. But the timing of when you use the push-pull method, I find, can be extremely important to your overall success. So overall, when you're looking at when you should use the push-pull method, there are two prerequisites that you must first meet. Prerequisite number one is super easy. You must first have successfully completed a no contact rule. So the important thing to remember here is that for the normal average person, they can probably just start the push-pull method immediately because essentially it's a type of flirting. But your situation where you're trying to get your ex back or trying to deal with this breakup and figuring out how to make them more attracted to you is a little bit different than the average situation. That is why it is so important for you to actually complete your period of no contact before you try anything. So that's the first prerequisite, but you must also meet the second prerequisite. And the second prerequisite is basically that you have to have had some type of success in conversations with your ex after the no contact rule. So like I said, situations can be different from person to person. Someone who wants to use the push-pull method on someone they just met who maybe has a crush back on them is going to have a lot more success than you trying the push-pull method on an ex who hasn't been very responsive after the no contact period. This is why we think it is vital for you to at least have some success in conversations with your ex. But what does success look like? Well, success is pretty simple. That means they're responding, and the responses aren't one-word responses or sort of veiled, uninterested ones. They have to be interested and engaged and be consistent for at least a short amount of time before you even try any kind of push-pull method. So let's move on and talk about what a good push and a good pull looks like, because that is the second area where we see people struggle time and time again. So once again, when we're dealing with pushes and pulls, we find that the number one mistake people make is they go to extremes. So the best way I can describe this is to imagine the push-pull method on a spectrum. On the right side, you have the people who push, and on the left side, you have the people who pull. So what are those actions looking like on a spectrum? Well, for the people who push, that means they're saying something like, I hate you, leave me alone, I never want to see you again. And then of course you got the opposite people who go to the extreme on the pull, which is basically them saying, I love you, come back to me, please come back to me, please, please, please come back to me. You get the picture. So when you're looking at the push-pull technique on this spectrum and you're wanting to stay away from the extremes, what should a good push and a good pull look like? Well, it's important to remember that you always need to start off light. So what does a light push look like? Well, it's simply doing something like not immediately responding to your ex's texts. But what does a good pull look like? Well, that's giving them a playful look or a playful touch when you see them in person. There's all sorts of variations of light pushes and pulls, and we could talk for hours about it, but I actually think it's better to take a macro bird's eye view point of view of this entire process, because you are going to need to do something really interesting with regards to the push-pull method in your particular situation. So here is the big point of where your push-pulls are going to be different from the average person who's just wanting to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend's push-pulls. So just like our analogy of fishing, you're going to slowly want to ratchet up the intensity and the frequency of your pulls and slowly ratchet down the intensity and the frequency of your pushes. Therefore, you're going to be pulling your ex in and then pushing him away a little bit and then pulling him even more and then pushing him away a little bit and pulling him even more and then pushing him away a little bit until eventually he's so close he kind of is like making the first move. Yeah. Of course, there's still one little bit of a fly in the ointment to this sort of fishing push-pull technique, and that's how do you know that it's okay to start doing this, where you're starting to kind of pull him a little bit and push him a little bit lightly away? Well, it all really boils down to reciprocation. So if you're in a situation where you are trying the push-pull technique and you're noticing that every time that you pull him in, he's reciprocating the behavior, it's a good time to lightly push him out and then pull him in even more. So ultimately, how you are going to be determining whether or not you should be using the push-pull method and the frequency of which you should be using the pulls and the pushes is how likely they are reciprocating your type of behavior. Oh yes, and there is one more thing that I forgot to mention. In some rare cases, you'll notice that your ex doesn't just reciprocate your behavior, he actually initiates his version of a pull. And if you're seeing that happening, it's a great idea to ratchet up the intensity and the frequency of your pushes and pulls even more. But remember, the main goal here is always to view it kind of like you're trying to catch a fish. You know, they do say there's plenty of fish in the sea, you just have your eye on that one. So remember, don't pull him in all the way at once, and just progressively increase the frequency in which you're pulling him in and pushing him out. Remember, you always want to pull in more than you're pushing as sort of your situation grows, not at first.